Somewhere along the way, someone measured you. Maybe it was a test in a quiet classroom. Maybe it was a number a teacher said out loud, or a grade that followed you home. Or just the slow, silent sorting that happens when a room decides who is clever and who is not. You were young. You did not get a say. And a part of you has carried that verdict ever since, like a sentence handed down before you could speak in your own defense. If you have ever sat in a room full of smart people and felt like a fraud, stay with me. Because the thing they measured was never the thing that decides your life. I want to take the next 20 minutes and walk slowly through how we got here, how a single number came to sit in judgment over millions of people, why it was always missing something enormous, and what the science actually says about the kind of intelligence that runs your real life, the one no exam was ever built to find. By the end, I think the way you see your own mind will have quietly changed. Let us begin a long time before the test existed. For most of human history, there was no such number. For tens of thousands of years, we humans lived in small bands of 40 or 50 people, and survival had almost nothing to do with abstract reasoning on paper. It had to do with whether you could read a face across a fire, whether you could sense that the mood of the group had shifted before anyone said a word, whether people trusted you enough to share food with you when you had none. The brain you carry right now was shaped by that world. It was built to feel its way through other people, to track loyalty and threat and grief and love, not to fill in bubbles on a sheet. Think about what that means. The deepest, oldest layers of your mind are social and emotional. They are not a weakness bolted onto your reason. They are the foundation your reason was built on top of. Then, a little over a century ago, we built a machine to rank minds, and we slowly forgot everything that came before it. In 1905, a French psychologist named Alfred Binet was asked to solve a narrow, practical problem. The schools of Paris needed a way to find children who were struggling, so they could be given extra help. So Binet, working with a young doctor named Theodore Simon, designed a set of small tasks, and from them they produced a single score. That score became the first real intelligence test. And here is the part almost everyone forgets. Binet himself was afraid of his own invention. He wrote plainly that intelligence was not a fixed quantity, that his test captured only a thin slice of a person at one moment in time, and that it should never be used to brand a child as permanently limited. He built the ruler, and he begged us not to mistake the ruler for the whole of a human being. We did not listen. We took his gentle, temporary tool, and we turned it into a destiny. When the test crossed the ocean to America, a Stanford psychologist named Lewis Terman rebuilt it into the Stanford Binet scale and gave the world the number we now call the intelligence quotient. The intention curdled almost immediately. During the First World War, a psychologist named Robert Yerkes convinced the Army to test nearly 2 million soldiers and sort them by their scores. It was the largest measuring of human minds that had ever happened, and it hardened a dangerous idea into common sense, that a person's worth could be printed as a single figure. Schools began ranking children by it. Whole futures were routed toward ceilings or floors based on one afternoon with a pencil. The number had escaped its cage, and it carried something darker with it. In those early decades, this new science of measuring intelligence became tangled with the ugliest movement of its time, a belief that some kinds of people were simply born better than others. The test was used not to help the struggling as Binet had wanted, but to justify holding people down. That is the inheritance hidden inside the number you were handed as a child. It was never neutral. It was never the clean, objective fact it pretended to be. But let us be fair to the number, because this is not a story about it being worthless. It is a story about it being incomplete. Here's where the science turns, and where it starts to give you something back. Lewis Terman, the man who spread the IQ test across America, was so convinced of its power that he ran an experiment to prove it. Starting in the 1920s, he gathered around 1,500 children with very high scores, and he followed them for the rest of their lives. He was certain he was watching a future collection of geniuses, men and women whose raw intelligence would lift them above everyone else. His subjects even had a nickname. They called themselves the termites. And the results quietly broke his theory. Yes, many of them did well, but many did not. Some struggled, some drifted, some lived ordinary and even unhappy lives. And when researchers looked closely at who thrived and who did not, the thing that separated them was not their test scores, because they all scored high. It was something the test had never measured at all. The ones who flourished had more persistence, more emotional steadiness, more confidence, more ability to connect with other people. The number got them noticed. Something else entirely decided what became of them. So what was that something else? For most of a century, it did not even have a name. In 1990, two psychologists, Peter Salovey and John Mayer, finally gave it one. They called it emotional intelligence. And they were not being vague or poetic. They were describing a real, structured, measurable set of abilities the old tests had stepped right over. The ability to recognize what you are feeling while you are feeling it. The ability to read the emotion moving across another person's face. The ability to calm your own panic. To sit inside discomfort without running from it. To understand why a friend went silent when nothing was said out loud. 5 years later, a science writer named Daniel Goleman carried that idea to the world, and he pointed at something that should unsettle anyone who has ever felt judged by their cleverness. When you follow real people across real lives, raw intelligence predicts far less about who thrives than we were all raised to believe. It opens the door. It rarely decides what happens once you are inside the room. Stop and test that against your own life for a moment. Think about the people you have actually watched succeed, not on a test, in a life. They were not always the quickest in the room. They were the ones who could stay steady when everything around them was on fire. The ones who could feel a meeting turn cold and change direction before it collapsed. The ones other people simply wanted to be near. You have known someone brilliant on paper and quietly impossible to be with. And you have known someone who would never top an exam, but who can walk into a room full of grief and say the one right thing. One of those people is easy to build a life beside. One of them is not. And the test only ever saw one of them. There is a feeling that comes with this, and I want to name it, because you may have carried it for years without words. It is the feeling of being good at the thing that does not get counted, of being the person everyone leans on, the one who senses the unspoken hurt, the one who holds the group together, and still suspecting somewhere that you are not the smart one. If that is you, I need you to hear something. You are not less intelligent. You are fluent in a kind of intelligence the test was simply blind to. And now we reach the strangest discovery of all. Because you might still believe, deep down, that thinking and feeling are opposites. That emotion is the static that interferes with clear reason. The science says the exact reverse. They were never enemies. They cannot even be pulled apart. A neuroscientist named Antonio Damasio spent years studying people who had suffered damage to one specific region of the brain, the part that links thinking to feeling. He wrote about one patient he called Elliot. Before his illness, Elliot had been a capable, successful man. The damage left his raw intelligence completely intact. His memory was sharp. His logic was flawless. He could still score beautifully on every intelligence test that exists. But he had lost the ability to feel his emotions in the ordinary way. And his life slowly, devastatingly fell apart. Listen to what that actually looked like, because it is one of the most important findings in all of psychology. Elliot could not decide. Faced with the simplest choice, which folder to work on, which restaurant to pick, what time to schedule a meeting, he would reason endlessly, He could lay out every option, weigh every consequence, build flawless logical arguments on all sides, and then sit there, unable to land on anything at all. His pure, undamaged reason could analyze forever. What it could not do was choose. Damasio understood that he was watching something most of us never get to see, a mind with all of its logic and none of its feeling. And that mind was helpless. Sit with what that means about you. The emotions you were maybe told to suppress, to control, to be embarrassed by, are not interference. They are the quiet hand that lets your thinking arrive at a decision at all. Damasio called the signals your body sends somatic markers, the gut feelings that quietly tag your options as good or bad, so reason has somewhere to stand. Without them, you do not become more rational. You become paralyzed. So if you have ever been told that you are too sensitive, too emotional, too much, I want you to really take this in. The thing you were shamed for is part of the machinery that lets a human being function in the world. It was never a flaw in the system. In a very real sense, it is the system. Why did we get this so wrong? Why did we spend 100 years worshiping one narrow kind of mind? The answer is almost embarrassingly simple. A number is easy, and a person is hard. You can print an IQ score on a page. You cannot print the way someone steadies a frightened child, or repairs a friendship after a stupid, painful fight, or knows, without being told, that tonight you need them to just sit beside you and not try to fix anything. Those abilities are real. They are some of the most powerful forces in any human life. But they do not fit inside a box, so we quietly pretended they did not count. We measured what was easy to measure. We called it the whole of intelligence. And then we let that small, convenient number sit in judgment over millions of people who were gifted in everything it could not see.
And here's the question that decides whether all of this matters or not. Does this other intelligence actually shape a life? Or is it just a kinder story we tell ourselves to feel better about a low score? The longest study ever run on human happiness answers that, and the answer is not subtle. Beginning in 1938, researchers at Harvard started following a group of men and then their families, and they have continued, generation after generation, for more than 80 years. They tracked careers, money, health, intelligence, everything you could measure. And when they finally asked what actually predicted a long, healthy, satisfying life, the answer was not wealth, it was not fame, it was not IQ. One of the study's directors, the psychiatrist George Valent, summed up decades of data in a single sentence. He said that the 75 years and $20 million of the study pointed to one conclusion: happiness is love. Full stop. The warmth of your relationships, your ability to connect and stay connected, did more to protect your body and your mind across a whole lifetime than any number a test could ever produce. Connection is not the soft reward you get after the real work of being smart. Connection is the work. And the skills that build it are exactly the ones the test ignored. Now, if the story ended there, it would only be half a relief. Because you might be thinking, fine, but the number they gave me as a child still felt fixed, like a height I could never grow past. So here is the part that should genuinely set you free, and it is the most hopeful finding of all. Unlike that childhood verdict, emotional intelligence is not fixed. It can be learned. It can be built, at any age, the way a muscle is built. The psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett has shown that simply getting better at naming your emotions, with more precision, more granularity, changes how well you can manage them, because a feeling you can name is a feeling you can finally work with. Other researchers have shown that the ability to pause before you react, to regulate the heat of a moment, grows with practice. And the work of the psychologist Carol Dweck
taught a whole generation something that applies perfectly here. The belief that your abilities can grow is itself part of what allows them to grow. You can get better at reading the people you love. You can get better at sitting with a hard feeling instead of fleeing it. You can get better at letting yourself be known. None of that was on the page they handed you, and none of it is closed to you now.
So let us go back to the beginning. Back to that room, the one where someone measured you. A part of you has carried that number for a long time, like a sentence you were never allowed to appeal. But you understand now what that test really was, and what it could never see. It measured a thin slice of you on a single afternoon, in a single language, on a single kind of problem, with a history far darker than anyone told you. It never measured the warmth you bring into a room. It never measured the way people soften when you arrive. It never measured the 1,000 small acts of understanding that are the actual, daily work of being a human being among other human beings. The thing that decides your life was never on that page. It was in you the whole time, in the part of you that feels, the part that reads a face across a fire, the part our ancestors survived on long before any test existed. You were never the one who failed the test. The test failed to see you. And the most important kind of intelligence you have is still growing, quietly, every time you choose to understand someone instead of judging them, starting tonight. If you stayed with me all the way to the end of this, it tells me something real about the kind of mind you have. You are the kind of person who would rather understand than scroll past, who would rather feel something true than be handed something easy. That is precisely the mind this channel was built for. Subscribe, and the next time we sit down to look honestly at why you feel the way you feel, it will quietly find its way to you a little sooner. Stay with us. There is so much more in you that is worth understanding, and we are only just beginning to look.